Lucille was 72 when she first noticed her skin changing, not just the little lines she'd grown to accept with grace, but something deeper. Her cheeks had lost their usual softness. Her hands, once plump and warm, began to look thinner, almost tired. It wasn't vanity. She'd lived a full life raising 2 daughters and teaching music at the local school. But when she glanced in the mirror one morning and barely recognized the face looking back at her, a quiet sadness filled her chest. She didn't tell anyone, just gently touched her cheek and sighed. Not long after that, she had a routine visit with her doctor, mostly to check her blood pressure and cholesterol. The nurse smiled and said everything looked fine, but before Lucille stood up to leave, the doctor paused. He looked at her and asked gently, "Lucille, are you getting enough antioxidants? You've lost a bit of your glow." It was such a strange thing to hear in a clinical setting. She chuckled nervously and said, "I eat my greens." But the question stuck with her, lingering in the back of her mind like a forgotten tune waiting to be played. That evening, while washing dishes, Lucille thought about all the fruits she'd eaten recently: apples, bananas, even a few strawberries. But dragon fruit? It had always looked too strange to buy, until last week. Her granddaughter had brought one over, pink and spiky, with a pulp that shimmered like moonlight. They ate it together, laughing at the way the seeds stuck to their teeth. But just like always, Lucille had tossed the peel straight into the bin. She remembered thinking, well, that part's useless. A few days later, she came across a quiet video online. A woman's voice, soft and slow, explaining how dragon fruit peel, yes, the part everyone throws away, was bursting with something called anthocyanins. She'd never heard the word before, but the way it was said made it sound important. Natural, powerful, and especially helpful for aging skin and tired eyes. Lucille replayed the video twice. She wasn't the type to believe everything on the internet, but something about it felt real, gentle, familiar, like advice from an old friend. So she tried it, not all at once, just a pot of water, some clean dragon fruit peels, and a quiet kitchen that smelled faintly of steam and memory. She added a little honey after the tea cooled, just like the woman said. The color was deep and warm, like summer in a glass. She didn't expect miracles. But that night, for the first time in weeks, Lucille slept soundly, and the next morning, her skin didn't feel so dry. There was a softness around her eyes, subtle but there. It became a small ritual. Once a week, she'd boil the peels, make jelly for her grandkids, or add a splash of vinegar to make a salad. Simple, nourishing acts. She never said it out loud, but she felt something change, not just in her skin, but in the way she cared for herself. No expensive creams, no chasing youth. Just listening to her body again. Lucille's story is one I've seen again and again. We grow up being told what matters and what doesn't, what to keep and what to throw away. But sometimes the things we overlook, like a piece of pink fruit skin, carry the greatest healing. And it's never too late to rediscover them. Lucille had always been careful in the kitchen. Even after retiring from her job as a piano teacher, she still moved with quiet precision, chopping vegetables just so, wiping down counters with warm water and lemon, saving leftover rice in neatly labeled containers. Waste was never something she liked, but some habits run deeper than intention. For as long as she could remember, she had always thrown the peel of dragon fruit straight into the trash. It was instinctual. The inside was the prize. The outside? Useless, wasn't it? That evening, she caught herself mid-motion, peel in hand, hovering over the bin, the same bin where she had discarded hundreds before. But something tugged at her. Maybe it was the memory of that soft voice from the video, or the way her doctor had looked at her that day. Like he saw something she didn't. She paused, set the peel aside. For the first time, she didn't throw it out. Lucille didn't know why it mattered so much. It was just a peel after all. But as she stood there, she remembered her mother's hands. Wrinkled and strong, always saving scraps, apple cores boiled into tea, corn silk dried in the sun, orange peels tucked into drawers. God gave you every part for a reason, her mother once said, holding up a potato skin like it was gold. Lucille hadn't thought about that in decades. Maybe, without realizing it, she had started to forget the wisdom of slow living, of seeing value in what others call waste. That night, she washed the peel carefully, just like the woman in the video showed. Salt water, soft scrubbing, running water rinse. It felt like a ritual, not just a task. The peel, usually discarded within seconds, now lay clean and bright on her wooden cutting board. She didn't know what to do with it yet, but she had already taken the first step. She had stopped the throw, stopped the reflex. That alone felt like a change. And it wasn't just about fruit. It was about how easily we give up on things. On old clothes, old stories, old habits, even on ourselves. Lucille sat at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile, the pink peel resting nearby. It glowed faintly under the light. Maybe, just maybe, there was something more inside. Something worth saving, not just in the fruit, but in her. That night, she slept differently. Not deeper, perhaps, but with more calm. Like she had rescued something fragile. Like she had said yes to a part of herself that had long been ignored. It's strange how the smallest gesture, the simple decision not to throw something away, can shift something inside you. Lucille didn't realize it yet, but she had just begun a new chapter. The next morning, Lucille stood in her kitchen with the dragon fruit peel laid out like flower petals on the counter. The house was still, save for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the low hum of cicadas outside her window. The day was already warming, sunlight streaking through the blinds and casting shadows across her teacups. It felt like the kind of day made for small beginnings. She took out her old enamel pot, the one she used to make soup when her daughters had colds, the one she almost gave away last spring. She filled it with water, slow and steady, then added the peels one by one. They floated for a moment, then began to sink, their fuchsia color spreading like ink in the clear water. It was beautiful, unexpectedly so. As the water heated, Lucille found herself remembering the last time she'd made anything just for herself. Not for company, not for grandchildren, not even for Sunday brunch. Just something simple, something healing. The memory didn't come easily. Years of caretaking had gently erased the habit of self-nourishment. She hadn't noticed it slipping away until now. The scent that rose from the pot was earthy, slightly sweet, familiar yet new. Lucille leaned over, inhaling slowly, letting the steam touch her skin. She thought of her doctor's words again. "Are you getting enough antioxidants?" She didn't know, but this felt like a good answer. A few minutes passed. She turned the flame down to low, watching as the water deepened to a rich, ruby hue. The transformation was quiet, slow. There was no rush. It was like watching time unfold gently in front of her. When the timer chimed, she removed the pot from the stove and strained the liquid into her favorite cup, the one with the faded roses and small crack near the handle. She let it cool a little before adding honey, stirring gently. The warmth from the cup seeped into her palms as she sat down by the window. Outside, the birds were busy. Inside, everything felt still. The first sip was surprising. Not in flavor, it was mild, soft, even comforting, but in what it made her feel. She couldn't explain it, like she had done something kind for herself. Something small but important. She hadn't expected it to matter so much. It wasn't just tea, it was a moment. A reclaiming, a gesture that said, "I deserve care too." Later that afternoon, Lucille called her daughter, not for anything urgent, just to share. "You'll think I've lost it," she laughed, "but I made tea from dragon fruit peel today." Her daughter paused, then replied, "That actually sounds lovely. What made you try that?" Lucille smiled. "I'm not sure, but it felt right." That night, as she got ready for bed, Lucille caught her reflection again. Same eyes, same soft smile. But this time, she didn't look quite so tired. There was color in her cheeks and something else, something she hadn't seen in a long while. A quiet sense of peace. She didn't need a doctor's chart to know something inside her was shifting, not dramatically, not all at once, but gently with each act of care. It had started with tea. It would not end there. It was Saturday morning, and the scent of warm toast and dragon fruit tea lingered in Lucille's kitchen when her granddaughter Emma burst through the door. 11 years old and full of questions, Emma always came with stories to tell, glitter on her cheeks, and a trail of sparkles left on the floor from her shoes. Lucille loved every bit of it. "Grandma," Emma said, wrinkling her nose playfully as she poked at the cup on the table. "Why does your tea look like purple juice?" Lucille laughed. "It's dragon fruit peel tea, sweetheart." Emma blinked. "You can drink the peel?" Lucille held up her cup like a secret shared. "You can, and you should. It's good for your skin, your blood, your eyes. Better than all those sugar drinks you love." Emma tilted her head. "But it's the peel. Mom says we don't eat that part." There it was again, the same old instinct, inherited and repeated. Good parts versus bad parts. Useful versus waste. Lucille smiled gently and patted the seat beside her. Well, sometimes grown-ups forget things too. We throw away what we don't understand. Emma sat down, curiosity blooming in her face. She took the cup, sniffed it, then handed it back. I don't know if I want to drink it, but it smells kind of nice. Lucille chuckled. It's okay, you don't have to today, but one day you might need it, for your skin or your eyes. She didn't say it to scare her, but Lucille remembered reading something in that quiet video, how anthocyanins in dragon fruit peel helped protect rhodopsin in the eyes, helping slow eye aging. It stayed with her, especially after the morning she'd struggled to read the back of a vitamin bottle without holding it an arm's length away. This tea, this strange little discovery, it wasn't a miracle, but it was something real. Later that afternoon, they made jelly together. Lucille boiled more peel, let Emma stir the water, dissolve the white jelly powder, and pour the mixture into little cups. Can we make it with coconut milk next time? Emma asked. Of course, Lucille said, already planning it in her mind. She'd never thought dragon fruit peel would be the thing that brought them closer. As the jelly cooled in the fridge, Emma peeked every 10 minutes. Is it ready yet? She asked again and again. When it finally set, she took a bite, paused, and then said, It's chewy, and it tastes like a sunset. Lucille laughed out loud. That's the best compliment this peel has ever gotten. That night, when Emma was picked up, Lucille tucked a small container of jelly into her granddaughter's bag. Give some to your mom. Tell her the peel's not trash anymore. When the house fell quiet again, Lucille washed the dishes with a lightness in her chest. She had spent so many years giving and giving, meals, rides, advice, hugs, but this was different. This was sharing. Sharing something discovered, not just done. It made her feel younger, wiser even, like someone with a secret worth passing on. As she sipped her tea before bed, she stared out the window, moonlight washing across her hands. The same hands that once threw that peel away without a second thought. Now they held something precious. The world hadn't changed, but Lucille had. And slowly, she was bringing others with her. It was just after lunch when the phone rang. Lucille dried her hands on a dish towel and answered, expecting it to be her daughter checking in or a neighbor asking about the upcoming church fair. But instead, it was the clinic, her doctor's office. The nurse on the other end was calm, polite. Just a routine follow-up, she said. They had her blood results. Lucille's heart gave a small flutter. Not fear, at least not yet, but that quiet hum of uncertainty that always came with test results. Your numbers look better, the nurse said, cheerful, especially your inflammation markers. Cholesterol is slightly lower too. Nothing major, but noticeable. Are you doing anything different? Lucille blinked. Nothing big, she said. I've just been drinking a kind of tea. The nurse chuckled lightly. Well, keep doing what you're doing. Whatever it is, it's working. Lucille hung up the phone and sat down, hands still damp. She wasn't the kind of woman to obsess over numbers. She'd lived long enough to know that health wasn't measured only in charts. But still, there was something comforting about proof, something quietly affirming. This small habit, this rescued peel, wasn't just sentimental, it was working. She thought back to the article she had saved on her tablet. It mentioned how the anthocyanins in dragon fruit peel could reduce oxidative stress, which plays a key role in inflammation and blood vessel health. She hadn't fully understood the science, but she remembered the words vascular elasticity. And now, the nurse had said the same thing. Her numbers were changing. It wasn't a coincidence. That evening, she brewed a fresh pot of the tea, this time adding a cinnamon stick and a thin slice of ginger. Not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. The ritual had become more than routine. It was comfort. It was clarity. She poured 2 cups and walked outside to sit on her porch. The wind had cooled and the leaves rustled above her. Across the street, she saw her neighbor Mary pulling weeds in the front yard. Lucille waved, then hesitated and raised her voice slightly. Would you like some tea? Mary looked up, surprised. Tea? Lucille held up the cup. Made from dragon fruit peel. It helps. Mary laughed. Helps what? Lucille smiled. Everything, but mostly it reminds me to take care of myself. They sat together for nearly an hour. 2 women in their 70s talking about husbands long gone, children who'd moved away, aches that come and go with the rain. And between sips, Lucille shared the story, not the science, not the article, just the feeling. The shift, the small but certain knowing that sometimes Healing doesn't arrive in grand gestures, but in the gentle practice of noticing what we used to overlook. Mary asked if she could try making it herself. "Of course," Lucille said, "but don't throw the peel away this time." That night, Lucille didn't even bother with a face cream. She looked in the mirror and whispered, "You're doing just fine." She believed it this time, not because the nurse said so or because the numbers had shifted, but because she had changed. And that truth ran deeper than any lab result ever could. It was late April when Lucille decided to tidy up the small patch of garden behind her house. The earth was soft from spring rain, and weeds had crept in while she was busy with other things. Doctor visits, quiet mornings, Emma's weekend drop-ins. She hadn't really touched the garden in almost a year, but something in her had shifted. Not a burst of energy, exactly, but a slow, building desire to reconnect with the soil, the sun, the parts of herself she'd quietly set aside. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and an old pair of gloves that smelled faintly of rosemary. As she knelt down beside the rose bush, her knees creaked, but she smiled. These aches were familiar, expected, but somehow they didn't bother her as much as they used to. There was a strength returning to her hands, not just in grip, but in purpose. While she trimmed a dying branch, a memory drifted in, clearer than it had in years. She was 9, in her grandmother's backyard, helping to cut peels from strange, bright fruits she didn't know the names of. Her grandmother would dry them on screens in the sun, crush them later into powders, or steep them into tea. "Nothing is just waste," her grandmother had said, wiping sweat from her brow. "Some things just need time to reveal their worth." Lucille sat back on her heels, the memory wrapping around her like a blanket. How had she forgotten that version of herself? The little girl who asked questions, who gathered leaves in glass jars, who believed food and medicine came from the same place? That part of her hadn't died. It had just grown quiet, covered under years of rushing, fixing, giving. She stood up slowly and looked over at the compost bin near the fence, the place where she used to toss the dragon fruit peels, avocado skins, mango stones. It had always been practical, but now she looked at it differently, not as an end, but a transition. Inside the house, a fresh batch of dragon fruit jelly was cooling in the fridge. Emma had helped make it again last week, layering in coconut milk and tiny basil seeds. They'd laughed when the mixture spilled over the tray and stuck to their fingers. "It looks like slime," Emma had squealed, delighted. "Delicious slime," Lucille had said. The garden felt different now, not something to maintain, but something that mirrored her. A place where discarded things could grow again, a space where healing wasn't about perfection, but about returning. That night, Lucille wrote in a small journal she hadn't touched in years. She didn't write much, just a few lines. "I am beginning to feel like myself again, and it all started with the peel I used to throw away." She stared at the words for a long time. It wasn't about the tea, or the antioxidants, or even the jelly. It was about the act of reclaiming, reconnecting, of honoring a part of herself that had been buried under years of noise. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. The rose bush swayed, pink petals catching the porch light like stars. And Lucille, with warm tea in hand and soil still under her nails, felt beautifully, quietly alive. It was Mother's Day when Lucille wrapped the small jar with a ribbon and placed it carefully in a woven basket beside a handwritten note. Inside the jar was dragon fruit jelly, soft, pink, flecked with tiny basil seeds, just the way Emma liked it. She had made 2 batches, one for her daughter and one for her granddaughter. But the note was the real gift. She didn't write anything elaborate. Just a few words about small things, about learning not to throw away what we don't yet understand, about how healing can look like a teacup left to cool on the porch or a peel rescued from the bin, about how sometimes what we discard without thought may one day save us, body and soul. Her daughter opened the basket at the kitchen table, her eyes skimming the note before looking up. "Mom," she whispered, "this is beautiful." Lucille smiled, her hands folded gently in her lap. She wasn't looking for praise. She simply wanted to leave something behind that wasn't made of silver or lace or old recipes scribbled on paper. She wanted to pass on meaning. That afternoon, the 3 of them sat together under the blooming magnolia tree in the yard, sipping dragon fruit tea and passing jelly back and forth on small plates. Emma leaned into her grandmother's side, hair brushing Lucille's shoulder. "I told my teacher that you made tea from the peel," she said. "She said she'd never heard of that." Lucille nodded. "Most people haven't, but that doesn't mean it isn't worth doing." Later that night, when the dishes were washed and the guests had gone home, Lucille walked through her quiet house and stopped by the window. The light outside was soft and golden, and the garden pulsed with late spring color. She thought back over the last few months, the phone call from the clinic, the afternoons in the kitchen, the startled joy of rediscovering herself in ways she never expected. It wasn't dramatic. There were no before and after photos, no big announcements, just a subtle shift in rhythm, a different kind of listening, a different kind of care. She was still the same woman who once tossed away the peels without a thought. But now she paused, now she noticed, and more importantly, now she taught, not by lecturing, but by living. Lucille knew she wouldn't be around forever. None of us are. But she also knew this. Some gifts don't disappear when we go. They're passed forward, sip by sip, spoonful by spoonful, like the tea that once simmered in her grandmother's pot and now brewed gently in hers. Before bed, she opened her notebook one last time and wrote, "I used to think I was aging quietly, but it turns out I was still blooming." She placed the pen down slowly, turned off the lamp, and walked into the evening with a heart full of gratitude and a refrigerator full of jelly. And somewhere, tucked in a corner of the garden, the dragon fruit vine she had just planted reached its small leaves toward the stars. Lucille's story may feel small to some. After all, she didn't travel the world, discover a cure, or change the headlines. But in her own quiet way, she reclaimed something just as powerful, the choice to keep living with intention. It's easy to forget ourselves as we age, to settle into routines, to stop exploring, to believe that life's best discoveries are behind us. But sometimes all it takes is one small shift, one moment of curiosity, one overlooked peel in the trash, to open a door we didn't know was still waiting. Lucille reminded us that healing doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't need to be expensive or trendy or hard to pronounce. Sometimes it's found in the pot you almost gave away, in the fruit you thought was finished, in the tea you sip while the sun goes down. Sometimes healing looks like remembering who you were before the world told you to be practical. And here's the thing, her story isn't just hers. It belongs to every woman who has ever put herself second, to every grandfather who saved the softest part of the fruit for his grandkids, to every pair of hands that kept giving even when they were tired. It belongs to you. So the next time you stand in your kitchen with something that seems unworthy, something that looks like waste, a peel, a moment, a memory, pause. Ask yourself if it might still have something left to give, because maybe, just maybe, the part you were about to throw away is the part that can bring you back to life. Lucille's peel became her turning point. What might yours be? We'll leave you with that question. No rush to answer it. Just let it sit with you. And if you do try the tea, let it be more than just a drink. Let it be your quiet beginning. In the weeks that followed, Lucille began writing again, not to anyone in particular, just small letters, folded sheets of quiet thoughts kept in a drawer lined with lavender paper. She didn't mail them, she never meant to. They weren't for the world, they were for the pieces of herself she'd left behind. One was to her younger self, the version of her who once believed wrinkles were something to hide. Another was to her mother, who used to steep orange peels into winter tea. One was for her husband, gone almost 10 years now, who used to say her laugh could wake up the dead. And one, still unfinished, was for Emma, for the day when she would be old enough to understand that strength doesn't always look like power. Sometimes it looks like care. In each letter, Lucille wrote not just about dragon fruit peels or antioxidant tea. She wrote about noticing, about listening, about not rushing through life like everything is disposable. And she realized, somewhere between the lines, that her real transformation wasn't in her body at all. It was in how she had learned to treat herself with gentleness again. She started to see beauty in the things she once rushed past. The way her hands shook slightly when she poured tea. The way her face, though softer now, still lit up when Emma called her grandma with a grin. The way she paused before throwing something away. Not just food, but a comment, a thought, a moment. She began treating her days like something sacred, not because every day was perfect, but because they were hers. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was fading. She felt like she was still unfolding. One evening, as the light dipped low and the kettle whistled, Lucille sat down and opened her drawer of letters. She ran her fingers across the paper, then picked up the one with Emma's name on it. She added a final line. Remember, love, the parts of you that feel overlooked today may one day be the reason you're still blooming. She folded the letter, placed it in the same worn notebook she had begun months ago, the one that started with a single thought about tea, and smiled. It was never about the dragon fruit peel, not really. It was about choosing to keep going, to keep seeing, to keep loving what's left. And if you, dear listener, are still here, if you've made it this far through Lucille's story, then maybe it's time for you to start your letter too. It had been nearly 6 months since Lucille first stopped herself from tossing that dragon fruit peel into the trash. 6 months of slow, quiet change, of tea, of journaling, of jelly making. 6 months of healing that couldn't be measured with a stethoscope. She walked into the clinic that morning with a scarf around her neck and a calmness in her step. It was a follow-up visit, just routine. But something about this visit felt different. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't even particularly curious about her numbers. What she felt, more than anything, was ready. The nurse greeted her kindly. The doctor, a man she'd seen for over a decade, looked up from her chart and paused. "You look well," he said. Not politely, not vaguely, but like he meant it. Lucille smiled. "I feel well." He tapped his pen against the desk. "I see your blood pressure's down, cholesterol holding steady. Energy levels?" She nodded. "Better than last year." He looked at her chart, then back at her. "You change anything? Meds? Exercise?" She laughed softly. "Just a peel." He raised an eyebrow. "A peel?" She leaned forward slightly, her voice warm. "Dragon fruit, the peel. I boil it, drink it, use it, and I stopped believing I had nothing left to fix." For a moment, he said nothing, just studied her face like he was trying to find the difference, the shift, not in her numbers, but in her. Lucille reached into her bag and pulled out a small glass jar. Inside was a swirl of soft pink jelly, sealed with a handwritten label. "Give this to your wife," she said, "or try it yourself. It won't save your life, but it might remind you to enjoy it more." He took the jar, smiling. "You know, I spend all day telling people what to cut out. Maybe I need to start telling them what to keep in." Lucille stood slowly, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the chair. "Tell them to start small. Tell them not to throw away the good parts just because they don't look familiar." As she turned to leave, the doctor called after her. "Lucille?" She turned, scarf trailing behind her like ribbon. "What made you start all this?" She thought for a moment, then said, "Someone once asked if I was getting enough antioxidants, but really I just wanted to feel like myself again." She walked out into the sunlight, letting the door close gently behind her. That night, Lucille made another pot of tea, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to sit with herself, quietly, with nothing to do but be. And somewhere, on a doctor's counter in a jar marked "Made with Love," her story had already begun to pass on. Spring melted quietly into summer, and Lucille's dragon fruit plant, planted with trembling hands and quiet hope, had finally bloomed. It wasn't loud, that bloom. No trumpet of petals, no spectacle. Just one shy flower opening at dawn like it had been waiting for her to notice. And she did. With both hands around her tea and sleep still in her eyes, Lucille stepped onto her back porch and whispered to the morning, "You're here." She stood barefoot in the grass. The light was soft, the world was still. But inside her, something shifted again, because it wasn't just the fruit blooming, it was her. For the first time in a long time, she felt whole, not because anything had been fixed, but because she had finally started listening to the quiet parts. The ones she used to rush past, the ones the world had said were no longer important. The hands that trembled, the skin that softened, the thoughts that came slower but deeper. She thought of her mother, of her grandmother, of the women who came before her, keepers of old remedies, of stories whispered over boiling pots. And now, here she was, a woman with a jelly jar and a story of her own. She smiled to herself. Maybe the world didn't need big miracles. Maybe it just needed women who knew how to hold on to what others called waste and turn it into something that heals. As the flower opened wide, Lucille reached for her notebook and wrote one final line. "I did not grow younger. I simply remembered how to bloom." She closed the book, let her breath soften, and let the morning hold her, whole, glowing, and enough. Fade out with soft music, gentle breeze, and a final message on screen. For every woman who thought her bloom had passed, it hasn't. Try the tea, start the story. Your peel might be the beginning of something beautiful. Lucille didn't set out to change her life. She wasn't chasing youth or looking for answers in the peel of a fruit. But when she paused, just once, to notice what she was about to throw away, everything shifted. What began as simple curiosity became a quiet revolution. One small act of care turned into a new rhythm of living. She went from exhaustion to energy, from self-neglect to gentle attention, from a woman quietly aging in the background to someone blooming again in the light. And the most powerful part, it didn't require anything complicated. No big diet changes, no new routines, just the decision to stop discarding what still had value. Whether it was a piece of dragon fruit peel or a part of herself she hadn't touched in years. Maybe that's what healing looks like after 60. Not drastic, not loud, just different, more aware, more intentional, more kind. So as you finish this story, ask yourself, what small thing have you been tossing away every day without realizing its worth? What part of you needs to be picked up again, steeped in warmth, and sipped slowly with care? You don't need a prescription to begin. All it takes is one peel, one pause, one quiet yes. Because like Lucille, you're not done yet. You're still growing, still needed, still blooming, and there is beauty in that.